The sound of the gavel didn't just end the argument, it shattered her dignity. Audrey sat frozen as the courtroom erupted in snickers. Her own half-brother, Caleb, had just pointed a manicured finger at her worn-out shoes and told the judge, "She's a waitress, Your Honor. She cleans tables for minimum wage. Giving her control of anything would be like handing a machine gun to a toddler." He thought he had won. He thought her silence was defeat. But Caleb didn't know that the man sitting quietly in the back row wasn't a spectator. He was the executor of a shadow trust worth $3 trillion. And he was checking his watch. The fluorescent lights of the Superior Court of Los Angeles County buzzed with an irritating low-frequency hum that seemed to drill directly into Audrey Miller's temples. She sat at the mahogany table, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide the fact that her fingernails were bitten down to the quick. She wore a charcoal grey blazer she'd found at a Goodwill in Reseda for $12. She had spent all night steaming it, trying to get the smell of mothballs out. But under the harsh scrutiny of Judge Harold Roth, she felt like she was wearing a trash bag. To her left sat Caleb Harrington. Caleb didn't just sit, he sprawled. He occupied space with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no in his 32 years of life. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Audrey made in a year of double shifts at the Greasy Spoon. He checked his cuticles, looking bored as his lawyer, a shark-faced man named Gregson, shuffled papers. "Your Honor," Gregson said, his voice oily and smooth. "This petition is frankly absurd. We are talking about the estate of the late Samuel Harrington, a man who built a real estate empire. My client, Mr. Caleb Harrington, has been the vice president of Harrington Holdings for 5 years. He has an MBA from Wharton. He understands assets liquidity and leverage." Gregson turned, slowly pivoting on his expensive heel to look down at Audrey. It was a look of pure distilled pity. Ms. Miller, on the other hand, pours coffee. A ripple of laughter went through the small gallery, mostly Caleb's friends and a few bored clerks. "Objection," Audrey's lawyer whispered. He was a court-appointed public defender named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he hadn't slept since 2005. "Relevance." "It goes to competency, Your Honor," Caleb interrupted, not waiting for his lawyer. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "We are here to decide the executorship of my father's personal assets. The beach house in Malibu, the vintage car collection, the portfolio. Audrey," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Audrey is a sweet girl. Really. But she struggles to pay rent on a studio apartment in the valley. She drives a 2012 Honda with a taped-up bumper. How can she be expected to manage a multi-million-dollar estate? She's poor, Your Honor. And in this world, poverty is a mindset." Audrey felt the heat rise up her neck. It wasn't just the insults, it was the kernel of truth. She was broke. She had spent the last 7 years estranged from her father, Samuel, refusing his money because she couldn't stomach his cruelty. She had built a life on her own terms. It was a small life, yes, a hard life. But it was hers. "I took care of him," Audrey said softly. Her voice cracked and she cleared her throat to try again. "I took care of him in the last 6 months, when he got sick, when you were skiing in Aspen, Caleb." Caleb rolled his eyes. "You changed bedpans, Audrey. That's what you're good at, cleaning up messes. That doesn't mean you get to own the house." Judge Roth sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked at the clock. It was 11:45 a.m. He wanted lunch. "Miss Miller," the judge said, his voice bored. "Mr. Harrington makes a compelling point regarding fiduciary experience. The court is inclined to grant temporary executorship to Mr. Harrington, pending the formal reading of the last will and testament this afternoon. But, Audrey started. The decision is made, the judge snapped, banging the gavel. Court adjourned until the probate hearing at 2:00 p.m. Caleb turned to Audrey, a winning smile plastered on his face. He leaned in close, so only she could hear. Don't worry, sis, he whispered, his breath smelling of peppermint and expensive scotch. I won't leave you on the street. I'm thinking of keeping the Malibu house. We'll need a maid. I hear you have experience. He laughed, patting her on the shoulder patronizingly, and strode out of the courtroom, his entourage trailing behind him like ducklings. Audrey sat there for a long time. She felt a hand on her arm. It was Mr. Henderson. I'm sorry, Audrey, he said, packing his briefcase. These guys, they have resources we don't. Maybe you should just settle, take whatever cash payoff he offers, and walk away. Audrey looked up. Her eyes were dry. She had cried enough tears for Samuel Harrington over the years. She wasn't going to cry for Caleb. No, she said, her voice steadying. Dad told me to be here. He sent me a letter 3 days before he died. He said, show up, Audrey. Just show up and watch. Watch what? Henderson asked. I don't know, she admitted. She looked toward the back of the courtroom. Sitting on the very last bench was an elderly man in a tweed suit. He had a white beard and held an old leather briefcase on his lap. He hadn't moved during the entire hearing. He wasn't looking at the judge or Caleb. He was looking right at Audrey. When their eyes met, the old man gave a barely perceptible nod. I think, Audrey whispered, I think I'm supposed to watch the show. To understand the carnage that was about to unfold, you have to understand Samuel Harrington. The world knew Samuel as a mid-tier real estate mogul. He owned a dozen luxury apartment complexes in downtown LA, a few strip malls and a construction firm. He was rich, certainly worth maybe $50 or $60 million. Enough to make his son Caleb an insufferable brat, but not enough to move markets. But Samuel was paranoid, and he was brilliant. 30 years ago, Samuel had predicted the dot-com crash. He had predicted the 2008 housing crisis, and while everyone else was panic selling, Samuel was buying. But he didn't buy in his own name. He created a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore trusts, and blind holding entities. He bought lithium mines in Nevada before electric cars were a thing. He bought water rights in regions that were now facing drought. He invested in a small garage-based tech startup in Palo Alto that was now the leading AI chip manufacturer in the world. Samuel Harrington wasn't a millionaire. He was a silent trillionaire, and he hated his son. Caleb was everything. Samuel despised, flashy, lazy, and cruel. Caleb treated the family business like an ATM. Samuel had watched for years as Caleb humiliated staff, cheated on taxes, and treated his half-sister Audrey like dirt. Audrey was different. She was the daughter of Samuel's second wife, a school teacher who had died when Audrey was 10. Audrey had her mother's heart. When Samuel tried to buy her affection with ponies and cars, she rejected them, asking instead why he didn't pay his workers more. When she was 18, she caught Samuel bribing a city official to overlook safety violations. They had a massive fight. Audrey walked out. I don't want your blood money, she had screamed. I'd rather scrub toilets than live off your corruption. And she did. For 7 years she worked as a waitress, a cleaner, a tutor. She never asked for a dime. Samuel watched her from afar. He hired private investigators, not to spy on her, but to make sure she was safe. He watched her struggle. He watched her give her tips to homeless men. He watched her handle rude customers with grace. And he realized something. She was the only one worthy of the burden. 6 months ago, Samuel was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. He didn't tell Caleb. Caleb only found out when Samuel collapsed at a board meeting. Caleb's reaction was to immediately call his lawyers to ensure his inheritance was secure. Audrey's reaction was to quit her job and move into the hospice facility to sleep in the chair next to his bed. It was during those long nights, listening to the beep of the morphine pump, that Samuel and Audrey finally talked. "I'm sorry." Samuel had rasped his skin yellow and papery. "For everything." "It's okay, Dad," Audrey had said, wiping his forehead with a cool cloth. "You're just a man. You made mistakes." "Big mistakes," Samuel whispered. "But I fixed it. I fixed the will." "I don't want the money, Dad. Give it to Caleb. Let him have the apartments." Samuel had smiled then, a crooked, weak smile. "Oh, he'll get what he deserves, Audrey. He'll get exactly what he deserves. But promise me one thing. Anything. When the lawyers read the will, wear the red dress." "What?" "The red dress. The one your mother wore on our first anniversary. I kept it. It's in the safety deposit box. Wear it to court, and don't say a word. Just let them talk." Audrey hadn't understood then. But as she walked out of the courtroom, heading toward the law offices of Sterling, Cooper and Associates, for the reading of the will, she clutched the garment bag in her hand. She went into the public bathroom of the courthouse. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. The grey blazer was dull, lifeless. She unzipped the bag. The dress was vintage crimson silk, elegant and severe. It was a power suit before power suits existed. She stripped off her poor clothes. She put on the silk. It fit perfectly. It smelled faintly of lavender and her mother's perfume. She put on a shade of lipstick she rarely wore. Deep red. When she walked out of the bathroom, she didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like a queen going to war. She caught a cab to the law firm. She didn't have enough cash for the fare, so she had to ask the driver to stop at an ATM, praying her account wasn't overdrawn. It had $4,200 left. She withdrew $40. She arrived at the skyscraper in downtown LA at 1:55 p.m. The conference room on the 40th floor was all glass and chrome. Caleb was already there, feet up on the table, drinking a glass of sparkling water. He was laughing with Gregson. When Audrey walked in, the laughter stopped. The red dress was striking against the sterile white room. She looked taller. Her posture had changed. Caleb blinked, disoriented for a second. Then the sneer returned. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look who decided to play dress-up. Did you rent that, Audrey? Or did you steal it from the costume department of a high school play?" Audrey didn't answer. She pulled out a chair at the head of the table opposite, where the lawyer usually sat, and sat down. "That's reserved for the executor," Caleb snapped. "Move." "The executor isn't here yet," Audrey said calmly. Her voice didn't shake this time. "I am the executor," Caleb spat. "The judge said so." "The judge said temporary executor pending the will." A deep voice boomed from the doorway. They all turned. It wasn't the usual family lawyer, Mr. Pendergast, who stepped in. Pendergast was a nervous little man who did whatever Caleb said. Instead, the man from the back of the courtroom walked in. The man in the tweed suit with the white beard. He carried the old leather briefcase. Behind him walked 4 men in black suits who looked like Secret Service agents. They took positions at the doors, crossing their arms. Caleb frowned. "Who the hell are you? Where is Pendergast?" The old man walked to the head of the table. He didn't look at Caleb. He placed the briefcase on the table and clicked the brass latches open. Snap, snap. Mr. Pendergast has been relieved of his duties due to a conflict of interest regarding embezzlement. The old man said, his voice gravelly and British. My name is Arthur Blackwood. I am the senior partner of Blackwood International based in Zurich. Zurich? Caleb scoffed. My dad's assets are in LA. We don't need a Swiss banker. Arthur Blackwood looked at Caleb over his half-moon spectacles. Mr. Harrington, Blackwood said softly. You are under the impression that you are here to inherit a real estate company worth $50 million. He pulled a thick document from the briefcase. It was bound in leather with gold leaf edges. You are mistaken. Blackwood turned to Audrey. Good afternoon, Miss Kensington. It's Miller, Caleb corrected. Her name is Miller. Not in this will, Blackwood said. He opened the document. Shall we begin? The air in the room seemed to get thinner. Caleb took his feet off the table. He sensed for the first time that the ground beneath him was not solid. It was a trap door, and the latch was about to slip. Arthur Blackwood adjusted his spectacles. The silence in the room was so profound that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Caleb leaned forward, his greed momentarily overriding his confusion about the Zurich connection. Let's skip the theatrics, old man, Caleb said, drumming his fingers on the glass table. Just read the numbers. Who gets the beach house? Who gets the construction firm? Blackwood ignored him. He ran a gloved finger down the first page of the leather-bound document. Samuel Harrington divided his estate into 2 distinct entities. Blackwood began, his voice devoid of emotion. The first entity is known as the public estate. This encompasses all assets visible to the general public and the IRS under the name of Samuel Harrington. That's the company. Caleb smirked, looking at his lawyer, Gregson. That's everything. The public estate, Blackwood continued, consists of Harrington Holdings, the Malibu residence at 1402 Pacific Coast Highway, the collection of vintage Ferraris, and the construction arm Harrington Builds. Bingo, Caleb said, clapping his hands. And, Blackwood paused, looking up. According to Article 7, Section A of the last will and testament, the entirety of the public estate is bequeathed to his son, Caleb Thomas Harrington. Caleb jumped out of his chair, pumping a fist in the air. Yes, did you hear that, Audrey? Everything I told you, the house, the cars, the business, it's all mine. He turned to Audrey, his face twisted in a triumphant sneer. I told you Dad wasn't senile. He knew who the real businessman was. Don't worry, I'll give you 24 hours to get your junk out of the apartment before I sell it. Audrey sat perfectly still. Her hands were resting on the table, calm and composed. She didn't look devastated. She looked curious. Sit down, Mr. Harrington, Blackwood said sharply. I have not finished. What else is there? Caleb laughed, falling back into his chair. He gave me the empire. You can give her the cat or whatever. You have inherited the assets of the public estate, Blackwood said, turning the page. However, inheritance laws in the state of California, and specifically under the terms of this irrevocable trust, stipulate that the beneficiary must also inherit the liabilities attached to those assets. Caleb frowned. Liabilities? Dad had a mortgage or 2. So what? The equity covers it. Not quite, Blackwood said. He pulled a separate sheet of paper from the file, a red document. Samuel Harrington was a master of shielding his true wealth, but he used the public estate, the company you have been running as vice president for 5 years. Caleb as a lightning rod for bad debt. Blackwood slid the red paper across the table. Harrington Holdings is currently leveraged at 400% debt to equity. The Malibu house has 3 liens against it, totaling $12 million. The construction firm is facing a class action lawsuit for using substandard materials. A decision I believe you signed off on in 2023 to save costs on the Riverdale project. Caleb's face went pale. He snatched the paper. "What is this?" "It is a balance sheet," Blackwood said dryly. "The public estate is technically bankrupt. By accepting the inheritance, which you just did verbally on record, you are assuming personal responsibility for debts totaling $84 million. The room spun. Caleb dropped the paper. No, that's impossible. Dad was rich. We have cash flow." "Your father," Blackwood corrected, "had cash flow. You have a mountain of loans calling in their markers. The banks were held at bay only by Samuel's personal guarantee. Upon his death, that guarantee expired. The loans are due immediately." Gregson, Caleb's lawyer, looked terrified. We renounce the inheritance. My client rejects the bequest." "Too late," Blackwood said, tapping a small recording device on the table. "Mr. Harrington explicitly claimed the assets 2 minutes ago. It's all mine, I believe were the words." Audrey finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room like a blade. "You wanted the status, Caleb. You mocked me for being poor. You mocked me for driving a broken car while you leased Porsches on the company dime. Now you have the company. You have the status. You are the CEO of an $84 million hole in the ground." Caleb slammed his hand on the table, his veins bulging in his neck. "You planned this. You and this senile old bat. You tricked me." He pointed a shaking finger at Audrey. "You think this is funny? I'm ruined. And you get nothing. If I'm broke, you're starving. You're still just a waitress." Blackwood cleared his throat. It was a loud, authoritative sound that silenced Caleb instantly. "We have concluded the reading of the public estate," Blackwood announced. He reached down into the briefcase and pulled out a key. It was made of black titanium, heavy and dull. He inserted the key into a second, smaller lock on the briefcase. "Now," Blackwood said, his voice dropping an octave, "we shall proceed to the reading of the Shadow Estate." Caleb blinked. "The what?" "Samuel Harrington did not build his wealth on apartment complexes in Reseda," Blackwood said, opening a new file. This one was stamped with a seal Caleb didn't recognize, a crest of a phoenix rising from flames. He built it on information, rare earth minerals, deep-sea aquifers, and the algorithm that currently runs 40% of the global banking infrastructure. Blackwood looked at Caleb with disdain. "You mocked your sister for being poor in court today, Mr. Harrington. You called her a waitress. You judged her value by the clothes on her back, a fatal error." Blackwood turned to Audrey. He stood up and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Audrey Miller Kensington, as the sole designated beneficiary of the Aurora Trust, you are the owner of the Shadow Estate." "What is in the Shadow Estate?" Caleb whispered, his voice trembling. Blackwood put on his glasses. "The controlling interest in Cobalt X mining, the majority shareholder position in Ether AI, the deed to 40,000 acres of prime commercial real estate in Tokyo, London, and New York, and liquid assets held in the Sovereign Bank of Zurich." Blackwood paused for effect. "Total estimated value, $3.2 trillion. Caleb stopped breathing. Gregson dropped his pen. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Trillion. With a T. It was an amount of money that made billionaires look like beggars. It was an amount of money that could buy countries. "That's a lie," Caleb wheezed. "Dad didn't have trillions." "Your father," Blackwood said, "was the silent partner behind the 3 largest tech mergers of the last decade. He lived modestly to protect his family from kidnapping and extortion. He trusted only one person with the truth, the person who didn't ask for money." Blackwood slid the titanium key across the table to Audrey. "Ms. Kensington, the empire is yours. Your signature is required to activate the accounts." Audrey looked at the key. She didn't grab it. She didn't smile. She looked at Caleb, who was now slumped in his chair, looking like a man who had just been hit by a freight train. "Wait," Caleb stammered. "Audrey. Odd dog. Sis, look, I was stressed today. The court thing. It was just strategy lawyer talk. You know I love you, right? We're family. Half the blood in my veins is your blood." He stood up, his legs wobbly, and reached out to her. "3 trillion. We can do so much good. We can run it together. I have the MBA. You need help managing this. I can be your CEO. I'll handle the boring stuff. We'll be a team. Just like old times." Audrey stood up. The red dress flowed around her like liquid fire. She picked up the titanium key. "We were never a team, Caleb," she said coldly. "And you're right. I do need help managing this." She turned to Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood, does the trust own the debt of the public estate?" "It does, madam," Blackwood replied. "The loans Caleb defaulted on are held by a subsidiary of the Aurora Trust." "Good," Audrey said. "Call them in, immediately." "Audrey, no!" Caleb screamed. "That will bankrupt me. They'll take my condo. They'll seize my personal accounts." "You said poverty is a mindset, Caleb," Audrey said, walking toward the door. "I think it's time you started working on yours." The elevator ride down from the 40th floor was silent, but Audrey's mind was screaming. $3 trillion. The weight of it was physical, pressing down on her shoulders. She clutched the titanium key in her hand so hard it left an imprint on her palm. When the doors opened to the lobby, she expected to walk out into the smoggy LA afternoon and hail a cab. But the lobby was different. Standing near the exit were 6 men in dark suits wearing earpieces. In the center of them was a woman Audrey recognized from the news, Elena Rostova, the CEO of a global security firm that usually handled heads of state. Rostova stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Ms. Kensington," Rostova said, her accent thick and Eastern European. "We have been retained by Mr. Blackwood for your protection. The car is waiting." Through the glass doors, Audrey saw it. Not a limo, not a flashy sports car, but a convoy of 3 armored black SUVs, the kind the president traveled in. "This is unnecessary," Audrey murmured. "With respect, madame," Rostova said, guiding her towards the door. "Your net worth just exceeded the GDP of the United Kingdom. You are no longer a private citizen. You are a walking superpower. And there are people who will want what you have." As Audrey stepped out onto the sidewalk, a flash of light blinded her. Then another. Then 100. Paparazzi. "Over here, Audrey, is it true? Ms. Miller. How does it feel to be the richest woman in history? Look this way. Who are you wearing?" Caleb must have texted someone. Or maybe the court clerks leaked it. The news was out. The waitress heir. Audrey lowered her head, shielding her eyes, as the security team formed a wedge, pushing through the wall of cameras. They shoved her into the back of the middle SUV. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the noise instantly. Inside the car was like a living room. Cream leather seats, a minibar screens showing stock tickers. Sitting opposite her was Arthur Blackwood. He had taken a different elevator. How? Audrey asked, her breath catching. How did they know so fast? The world watches money. Audrey, Blackwood said, pouring a glass of sparkling water, and the markets just reacted. When the ownership of Ether AI shifted to your name 5 minutes ago, the stock jumped 12%. People ask questions. Audrey took the water, her hands trembling. I can't do this, Arthur. I'm a waitress. I know how to balance 3 plates on one arm and calculate a 20% tip in my head. I don't know how to run a shadow government. Your father knew you would say that, Blackwood said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. He left you a video. He filmed it 2 days before he died. He plugged the drive into the car's console. The screen flickered to life. Samuel Harrington appeared. He was sitting in his hospice bed, looking frail, hooked up to tubes. But his eyes were sharp. Hello, my little bird. Samuel's voice filled the car. Audrey felt tears prick her eyes. If you're watching this, Arthur has dropped the bomb. You're terrified. You're thinking about running away. Don't. Samuel coughed, taking a moment to breathe. I didn't give this to Caleb because he is weak. He thinks strength is bullying people who can't fight back. That makes him dangerous. But you, Audrey, you have the only kind of strength that matters. You know what it feels like to be nothing. Samuel leaned into the camera. The world is run by wolves, Audrey. I was a wolf. I had to be. But the pack needs a shepherd now. I trained you. You didn't know it, but I trained you. When you worked at the diner, I sent in difficult customers. I wanted to see if you would break. You didn't. You handled them with diplomacy. When your landlord tried to evict you illegally, I watched you study tenant law for 3 nights straight and beat him in court without a lawyer. You have the intellect. You just lacked the ammunition. Samuel smiled, a tear tracking down his cheek. Now you have the ammo. Use it. Not for revenge. Well, maybe a little revenge on Caleb. He's a prick. But use it to balance the scales. Change the world, Audrey. Be the queen I know you are. The screen went black. Audrey sat in silence as the SUV convoy sped down the freeway. She looked out the tinted window. They were passing the diner she used to work at. She saw her manager sweaty and yelling at a busboy outside. She felt a shift inside her. The fear was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Arthur, she said. Yes, madame. Where is Caleb right now? Blackwood checked his tablet. He is currently in the parking lot of the law firm, screaming at his lawyer. He is trying to liquidate assets to pay the immediate margin call on the debt you just activated. He thinks he can sell the Malibu house quickly. He can't, Audrey said. I own the lien. Precisely. Where is he going tonight? He has a reservation at Le Ciel, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. He booked it weeks ago to celebrate his inheritance. He invited his entire social circle. The young titans of LA business. Audrey turned from the window. A small, dangerous smile played on her lips, the exact same smile Samuel Harrington used to have before a hostile takeover. He's going to celebrate his bankruptcy, Audrey said. He thinks he can still bluff his way through. He thinks if he acts rich, people won't know he's ruined. Likely, Blackwood agreed. Image is everything to him. Turn the car around, Audrey commanded. "Where to, madame? I need to go shopping," Audrey said, smoothing down the silk of her red dress. "If I'm going to crash a party, I need diamonds. Real ones." Le Ciel was located on the roof of the tallest building in Los Angeles. It was the kind of place where a salad cost $80, and the water was imported from glaciers in Patagonia. At 8:00 p.m., the restaurant was buzzing. The elite of the city were there. Tech moguls, movie stars, heirs and heiresses. At the center of it all was Caleb Harrington. He was sweating through his suit, but he was putting on a masterclass in denial. He had ordered 3 bottles of Cristal champagne. He was laughing too loudly, patting people on the back, desperate to project success. "Oh, the hearing went great," Caleb lied to a group of models. "Just a formality. Dad left me the keys to the kingdom. We're expanding next year. Dubai, maybe. I'm thinking of buying a yacht." His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a notification from his bank insufficient funds. He ignored it. He just needed to get through tonight. He would find a hard money lender tomorrow. He would leverage the Harrington name. He could fix this. "A toast," Caleb shouted, standing on a chair. "To the Harrington legacy, to the future." The room applauded. Glasses clinked. Then the music stopped. The heavy double doors of the restaurant swung open. Usually the maitre d' stopped anyone who didn't have a reservation 6 months in advance. But tonight the maitre d' was bowing. 2 massive security guards walked in first, then Arthur Blackwood, and then Audrey. She had changed. She was no longer wearing the vintage red dress. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet, custom-fitted in the last 3 hours. Around her neck sat the Star of Sierra, a 40-carat sapphire necklace that Blackwood had retrieved from the vault. It was worth more than the entire building they were standing on. The room went dead silent. Caleb froze on his chair. He looked like a statue of a fool. Audrey didn't look at the crowd. She walked straight toward Caleb's table. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. They could smell the power on her. They didn't know what had happened, but they knew the hierarchy had shifted. "Audrey," Caleb squeaked. What are you doing here? You can't afford this place. Security." He waved at a bouncer. "Get her out of here. She's a waitress. She's trespassing." The bouncer didn't move. He was looking at Elena Rostova, who was standing by the door with her arms crossed. The bouncer knew who Rostova was. He wasn't suicidal. "I'm not here to eat, Caleb," Audrey said, her voice calm and melodic. "I'm here to collect." "Collect what?" Caleb hissed, climbing down from the chair. "Get out. You're embarrassing me." "I believe," Audrey said, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear, "that you are attempting to pay for this dinner with the corporate card for Harrington Holdings. So what?" "It's my company. Actually," Audrey said, holding up a sleek black tablet. "As of 4:00 p.m. today, Harrington Holdings has been placed into receivership due to insolvency. The assets have been acquired by the Aurora Trust." She tapped the screen. "I am the Aurora Trust." Gasps rippled through the room. The models backed away from Caleb. "And," Audrey continued, stepping closer, "since I now own the company card you are trying to use, I am declining the transaction." Caleb's face turned purple. You butch! You can't do that." "I just did. And since you have no personal funds, I checked your checking account. You're overdrawn by $4,000. I suggest you start washing dishes. Or maybe—" Audrey reached into her clutch. She pulled out a $10 bill. She tucked it into the breast pocket of Caleb's expensive suit. "Here, for the valet, assuming you still have a car." Caleb stared at her, his mouth open, his world collapsing. The people around him, his friends, were already pulling out their phones filming. The laughter started, not at Audrey, at him. "This isn't over," Caleb screamed, veins popping. "I'll sue you. I'll take you to court. I'll tell everyone you defrauded Dad." "We can go to court," Audrey said, turning her back on him. "But I should warn you, my lawyer isn't a public defender anymore." She walked toward the bar. The bartender, a man named Marco, who had once been rude to Audrey when she applied for a job there years ago, looked terrified. Miss Kensington," Marco stammered. "What can I get you?" "I'm buying a round," Audrey said, "for everyone in the restaurant." Cheers erupted. "Except him." Audrey pointed at Caleb without looking back. Caleb stood alone in the center of the room, the $10 bill sticking out of his pocket like a badge of shame. Audrey sat on a bar stool, the sapphire heavy and cool against her skin. Arthur Blackwood stood beside her. "Satisfying?" Blackwood asked quietly. "A little," Audrey admitted. She took a sip of water. "But Samuel was right. This isn't about him. It's about what comes next." "Indeed," Blackwood said. "We have a meeting at 600 a.m. The Prime Minister of Japan is flying in. He wants to discuss the lithium rights." Audrey closed her eyes for a second. The waitress from the valley was gone. "I'll be ready," she said. But just as the night seemed like a total victory, the elevator doors opened again. It wasn't a guest. It was a squad of police officers. Caleb, seeing them, started shouting. "Yes, arrest her! She stole my inheritance!" The lead officer, a captain with a grim face, walked right past Audrey. He walked up to Caleb. "Caleb Harrington." "Yes, finally some justice. Arrest my sister." "Mr. Harrington," the captain said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit arson." The room went silent again. "Arson," Caleb whispered. "I never—" "The warehouse fire in 2024, the captain said, spinning Caleb around and slamming him against the table. "The one you claimed the insurance money on your accomplice just flipped. He gave us the texts." Audrey watched as her brother was cuffed. She looked at Blackwood. "Did you know about this?" she asked. Blackwood took a sip of his drink. "Your father knew everything, Audrey. He was saving that evidence for a rainy day. It seems it is pouring." As Caleb was dragged out, screaming and crying, begging Audrey to help him, she didn't look away. She watched him go. She had mercy in her heart. Yes. But she also remembered the court hearing. She remembered him pointing at her shoes. She remembered him calling her poor in front of the world. She took the $10 bill that had fallen from his pocket to the floor. She picked it up. "Keep the change," she whispered. 3 months had passed since Caleb's arrest. The scandal had shaken Los Angeles, but the rise of Audrey Kensington had shaken the world. Audrey had spent every waking hour learning. She didn't just sign papers. She read them. She studied market trends, geopolitical strategies, and the intricate web of her father's empire. Arthur Blackwood was her constant shadow guiding her, but he was no longer her teacher. He was becoming her advisor. She was learning faster than anyone had anticipated. But the wolves were circling. The board of directors of Ether AI, the crown jewel of the Shadow Estate, was restless. They were old men who didn't like taking orders from a 30-year-old woman who until recently had been serving pancakes. They viewed her as a placeholder, a lucky lottery winner. The ringleader was Alexander Cross. Cross was a hedge fund manager with a net worth of $50 billion and an ego the size of a small planet. He was a minority shareholder in Ether, but he had influence. He had called for an emergency gala in London, a black tie event disguised as a charity fundraiser. But everyone knew the real purpose. It was a tribunal. Cross intended to vote Audrey out of the chairmanship, claiming inexperience as grounds for a hostile takeover. The gala was held at the Royal Opera House. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Audrey arrived wearing a gown of silver silk that looked like liquid mercury. She walked with a grace that silenced the room, but the whispers were audible. That's her. The waitress. I heard she doesn't even have a college degree. Cross is going to eat her alive. Audrey found Cross in the VIP lounge. He was holding court, surrounded by sycophants. In the center of the room, curiously sat an antique chess table. It was made of ivory and ebony, a prop for the intellectual elite to feign sophistication. Cross saw her and smiled a predator's smile. "Miss Kensington." Cross boomed, not bothering to stand up. "So glad you could make it. We were just discussing the future of ether. I'm afraid the consensus is that the company needs seasoned leadership." Audrey stood before him, her hands clasped. "My father built Ether, Mr. Cross. I intend to keep it." "Your father was a genius," Cross scoffed. "You are. Well, you're charming. But let's be real. This isn't a diner. You can't just smile and refill the coffee to fix a stock drop." The crowd chuckled. "Tell you what," Cross said, gesturing to the chessboard. "I'm a sporting man. Ether is about strategy, calculation, foresight. If you can prove you possess even an ounce of strategic thinking, I'll withdraw my motion to remove you." He tapped a pawn. "Play me. One game. If you last more than 20 moves, I'll back off. If I checkmate you, which I will, you resign as chairwoman voluntarily." Blackwood stepped forward, his face dark. "This is absurd. Miss Kensington is the majority shareholder. She does not need to gamble her legacy on a parlor game." Audrey raised a hand, stopping Blackwood. She looked at the board. Then she looked at Cross. She remembered the nights at the hospice. Samuel hadn't just taught her about business. To keep his mind sharp, they had played chess. Hours and hours of it. Samuel was a Grand Master-level player. And toward the end, Audrey was beating him. She remembered the diner, too. There was an old man named Mr. Abernathy who came in every Tuesday. He was a retired Russian chess champion who had fallen on hard times. Nobody paid attention to him, but Audrey would sit with him during her breaks. He had taught her the ruthless, aggressive style of the Soviet school. "I accept," Audrey said softly. A murmur ripped through the crowd. "She's crazy." Cross was the Oxford University champion. "Excellent." Cross grinned, rubbing his hands. "I'll take white. Ladies first would be patronizing, don't you think?" Cross moved his pawn. E4. Audrey moved hers. C5. The Sicilian defense. Aggressive. Combative. Cross raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you know the moves. How cute. Did you read a book?" The game began. Cross played fast, arrogant. He moved his knights and bishops with a flourish, making loud comments to the audience about his superior positioning. He was trying to humiliate her to make her crack under the pressure. "You see," Cross lectured as he captured her pawn, "business is about seizing opportunity. You hesitate, you die." Audrey said nothing. She played silently. Her face was a mask. By move 15, Cross was laughing. He had her queen pinned. He had control of the center. "Give up, dear." Cross smirked. "It's over. Stick to the menu." Audrey looked up. Her eyes were different. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, mathematical precision. "You're right, Alexander," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Business is about seizing opportunity. But you missed something." "And what is that? You're so focused on the attack," Audrey said, sliding her bishop across the entire board, "that you forgot to protect your king." She slammed the piece down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Check," Cross frowned. That's a mistake. I can just take your bishop." He reached for his rook. Then he stopped. His hand hovered. If he took the bishop, her knight would fork his king and queen. If he moved the king, her rook would slide down the open file. He stared at the board. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. "Wait," he muttered. "Wait. Move 18, Audrey said calmly. "Mate in 4. "Impossible," Cross snarled. "I'm Alexander Cross." "Mate in 4, Audrey repeated. "Unless you sacrifice your queen now, in which case it's mate in 7. The room was deadly silent. The masters of the universe, in their tuxedos, crowded around the table, staring at the board in disbelief. "My God," someone whispered. "She's trapped him." Cross turned red, then white. He ran the simulations in his head. There was no escape. The waitress had led him into a complex trap, sacrificing material to lure him into a kill box. You hustled me," Cross hissed. "You've played before." "I played for tips," Audrey said, standing up. "When you play for your next meal, you learn not to make mistakes." She looked down at him. "Checkmate, Mr. Cross. I believe you have a resignation to write." Cross stared at the board, his ego shattered. He knocked his king over with a trembling finger. I withdraw the motion," he choked out. Audrey didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She turned to the stunned board of directors. "Does anyone else wish to test my competency?" she asked. Silence. "Good," Audrey said. "Then let's get to work. We have a company to run." She walked out of the lounge, Blackwood trailing behind her, with a rare, beaming smile on his face. "That was masterful, madame," Blackwood whispered. "I just served him what he ordered," Audrey said. "Humble pie." 2 years later. The sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean, casting a golden glow over the terrace of the Malibu beach house. The house was no longer a bachelor pad for Caleb. It was a sanctuary. Audrey sat on the deck watching the waves crash against the rocks. She wore a simple white sundress, her feet bare. Inside the house was bustling, but not with a party. It was a scholarship fundraiser. Audrey had transformed the Aurora Trust into the most aggressive philanthropic force on the planet. She didn't just write checks, she built systems. She had launched the Samuel Harrington Initiative, a program that paid full tuition for children of service industry. Workers, waitresses, janitors, bus drivers to go to Ivy League universities. She had cleaned up the supply chains of Cobalt X. She had fired the corrupt managers. She had forced the board to double the wages of the miners. She was no longer known as the waitress heir. The media now called her the Iron Angel. Arthur Blackwood walked onto the deck carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. He looked older now, his walk a little slower, but his eyes were bright. "The guests are asking for you, Audrey," he said. "Give me a minute, Arthur," she said. "I was just thinking about Caleb." Caleb was currently in a minimum security facility in Nevada. He was working in the prison laundry. Audrey had visited him once. He was thinner, quieter. He had cried when he saw her. He told her he was learning to fix machines. He said for the first time in his life, he was actually good at something that involved work. "He is where he needs to be," Blackwood said gently. "And you are where you belong." Audrey looked at the ocean. I never wanted this, you know. The money. The power. I just wanted, I don't know, to be seen. To be respected. You are respected, Blackwood said. Not because of the trillions, but because of what you did with them. He handed her a tablet. The latest numbers from the initiative. 5,000 students graduated this year. Doctors, engineers, artists, all of them from backgrounds like yours. You changed the trajectory of 5,000 families. Audrey smiled. It was a real smile reaching her eyes. That's better than a checkmate, she said. She stood up, brushing off her dress. Okay, let's go inside. I think Mr. Abernathy is waiting for a rematch. The Russian chess player, Blackwood laughed. You flew him in tall. First class, Audrey said. He's the head of my strategic planning department now. They walked back toward the house. Through the glass doors, Audrey could see the people she had gathered. Not just the wealthy, but the people she had brought up with her. The old manager from the diner, who she had forgiven and hired to run her catering. Mr. Henderson, the public defender, how her chief legal counsel. She paused at the door. She touched the necklace she was wearing. It wasn't the sapphire. It was a cheap silver locket her mother had given her. Inside was a picture of her father, Samuel. We did it, Dad, she whispered. We watched the show. And then we rewrote the ending. Audrey stepped through the doors. The room erupted in applause. She didn't shrink away. She didn't hide. She walked into the center of the room, shook the hand of a senator, hugged a scholarship student, and took her seat at the head of the table. The waitress was gone. The Queen had arrived. And the best part, she still knew exactly what it felt like to be the one pouring the coffee. And she would never, ever let the world forget it. Audrey's journey from the diner to the boardroom proves one thing true. Power isn't about what you inherit, but what you endure. She faced mockery, betrayal, and the crushing weight of $1 trillion secret. Yet she never lost the grit that made her who she is. Caleb learned the hard way that arrogance is a loan with a high interest rate, and eventually life comes to collect. If you enjoyed this story of justice, strategy, and the ultimate underdog victory, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their current struggle is just the setup for their future success. And make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. What would you do with a secret fortune? Let me know in the comments below.